Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Expertise Podcast. I'm your host, Roland Martin, and I hope that today's conversation will expand your knowledge. Today I welcome Kevin Bauman to the show. Kevin is the president and CEO of Shervin, a company that, among other things, builds kitchens and hotel furniture. I consider Shervin to be a relatively large company, as it employs several hundred people. But it was not always that way. In the following conversation, Kevin tells the story of how Shervin began and grew to what it is today. Along the way, he pulls from his experiences to offer advice to other entrepreneurs who might be thinking about or are in the process of starting their own business. I hope that you will enjoy it and learn from his expertise. Welcome, Kevin, to Everyday Expertise. It's really good to have you here.
Thank you. Looking forward to this conversation that we're venturing into here.
Yes. So tell me, just to get started here, what does your work look like currently, or what keeps you busy?
Well, I'll probably be sharing a little bit more on the journey of Shervin later on here, but our company has grown significantly over the last 30 years. And so it has changed a lot with what I'm doing today. But currently what I'm doing basically is meeting with the various different managers and just simply discussing with them what some of the challenges they might be facing and then brainstorming solutions. But I'm no longer involved in the day-to-day business anymore. The business basically carries on without my direct involvement. But I spent a fair bit of time then on looking at vision, strategy, where's the company going? Currently, we're working on our 2021 business plan and our budgeting for the upcoming year. So that takes a lot of work just to try to figure out what all is going to be taking place in 2021. Once we put our budgets in place, then we look at all our staffing needs that we are going to be needing. And we look at some of the areas that are a little bit more challenging and where maybe are understaffed and specifically look at those points, those departments, and determine how we can better service our customers in 2021.
Okay.
So that involves a lot of my time.
So you're doing a lot of big picture
That's
stuff
correct.
in your day-to-day work.
Absolutely.
Currently,
a lot of big picture, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, what is the business that you're involved in? What are some of the products that you're producing, some of the services that you're offering? Just give me a general overview of what Shervin is.
So over the years, we've had many different opportunities out there. Some people say that I don't know how to use the word no, but they don't realize how many times I have used the word no. And so quite a number of years ago, we as a management team said we've got to determine what really is our vision. Mm-hmm. And so we actually have a vision statement that we have hanging on the walls of many of our different locations. And that vision statement is to create inspired interiors that grace your living space with unrivaled quality, distinction, and peace of mind. So we use the word to create inspired interiors. Mm-hmm. And that word interiors defines who we are. So basically, if you come along and you ask for anything within a living space, whether it's a hotel, if it's an office, or if it's a home environment, or if it's a retirement home, or anything like that that comes up, we will entertain that if it's within the four walls of that environment.
Okay. As
soon as it goes outside, then we immediately say, no, that's not us.
So that's defined who you are a little bit.
That defines who we are, yeah. So we're into kitchen cabinetry and hotel furniture, but we've also done office furniture. We've done different types of work over the years that kept us focused and keeps us in line with what our vision is. So anything to do with interiors is basically what we'll take a good look at that.
Yeah. So are there things that you focus on within that? You said that you'll take a look at it. Does that mean that there's things you prefer doing within?
There's things, so we prefer the furniture or the cabinetry aspect of it. And we have basically stuck with that, but we started off with business basically doing whatever came along. And I started on my own back in 1991 and I did whatever came along.
Yeah.
I remember doing some very interesting projects, and with time, we had to define as to who we are. And so we decided we're going to focus on kitchen cabinets and production furniture. And what got us into the production furniture sector was I had an individual come along and wondered if we would consider starting to make grandfather clocks.
Okay.
And I had never done quote unquote mass production before. His mass production was going to be 20 grandfather clocks.
Okay. You were used to just doing like a one order of,
everything was
piece of furniture or something like that.
Everything was custom before.
Yeah.
So to build 20 grandfather clocks told me that, okay, we're going to have to do something that's repetitive here. And this is interesting. Right. And so it grabbed my attention. And we started fine tuning this, and the orders just kept getting bigger and bigger all the time. And at that point is when I had to come along and say, okay, we're going to focus in on production furniture and kitchen cabinets. And so we got out of the just somebody coming along and wanting a table, a dining room table, or back and then it was Hutchison buffets and one of bedroom suites. We got out of that and just focused on kitchen cabinets and hotel furniture. And then what happened was in the hotel furniture industry, as that started to grow, then we also got involved in the upholstery division. And we've got a company in Toronto that's called Vogel.
Okay.
And that's upholstery. And people wonder, well, how did I get into that? Well, the thing that happened there was that company faced some financial challenges, and they offered the company to us, and we decided to take it over. So now we're into upholstery as well. But again, that is within somebody's living space.
Right, yeah.
And so we do that kind of work.
Nice. So are there several different businesses with that you oversee, or are they all under this? Are they all under the same? Are they all divisions within the same company?
So just to step back again.
Yeah.
Started the company in 1991, basically doing whatever came along.
Right.
And then we got into focusing on kitchen cabinets and production furniture. And so we were building grandfather clocks for quite a length of time, but I saw that whole industry starting to fade out because grandfather clocks was a trend.
Okay.
Very, very few people even want a grandfather clock today.
Yeah.
And so I saw that whole industry dying out.
Right. And
I had an individual that sold us hardware come into my office one day and asked the question, Kevin, are you keeping busy? And I says, well, we're not swamped with work. We're keeping busy, but what are you asking here? He said, well, there's this company in Toronto called Artco that all they do is market hotel furniture. And they're looking for more manufacturers for manufacturing their product. And they're so busy that the companies that they're using right now can't keep up. So they're just looking for another company that can assist them with their workload.
So they were just making the deals? They weren't actually building any of the furniture themselves? Okay.
Yeah, they were just making the deals and doing the marketing and looking for other people to manufacture. And so I said, I'd be interested in hearing what they've got to offer. And so they send out their top sales guy to pay us a visit, and I gave him a plant tour, and he observed what we were doing in the grandfather clock industry. Okay. And at that point, we were building a very high-end grandfather clock. We had one line like that, and he took special attention to that. And he said, if you can build something like that, you can build whatever my needs are.
Okay.
And so he came along and he placed an order of 100 bathroom shelves. They were just a 40-inch shelf that went in the bathroom with a rod on it, towel rod on it.
Okay.
And we built 100 of those, and he was happy with the workmanship and just kept on giving us more and more orders.
Okay.
And it got to the point where hotel furniture then became 70% of our business. And so people came along and they wondered, how are you doing projects in San Francisco and in Chicago and in New York and all these different cities in the States and in this little town of Hawksville? Yeah. And I said, well, that's how it came about.
Yeah.
Just simply having this gentleman walk into my office and asked if we're busy.
Wow.
And so that continued to grow then. And eventually we purchased the Artco company.
Okay.
And because this gentleman the owner of Artco was around 70 some years old and he was ready to retire. And I realized that if I don't purchase the company, then we're going to be in big trouble.
Because you wouldn't necessarily be getting their business anymore with a different owner?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We knew we needed the name Artco, and we had to have all his contacts in order to be able to keep our business going.
Were you their main manufacturer at that point or not?
We became their main manufacturer,
Okay.
yeah. With time, the other manufacturers, I don't know if they weren't passionate about the opportunity that was at their fingertips or what the issue was, but they started to dwindle down and we continued to grow. And yes, we
Were you the only one?
We were just about the only one.
Okay.
There was one other small one yet, but we were putting ourselves in a very vulnerable position by doing such high volume work
Right.
with one company.
Because if they would decide that they didn't need you anymore, then all that work would dry up. Yeah.
If they would decide that they didn't need us anymore, if they decided to shut down for some
Right.
reason or whatever, we would have been in big trouble. And so to have been able to purchase the Artco name was very advantageous to us.
Yeah. Are you contracting out any parts of the manufacturing, or are you doing all the manufacturing for Artco at this point?
We're doing a large percentage of the manufacturing. Now that we've built a new facility in St. Clements, we are able to handle basically all the work now. We
Okay.
still farm out a little bit of work, but not much at all.
Okay.
When we were still in Hawksville, under one roof, we had kitchen cabinets and production furniture all running under one roof. There was no way we could keep up with the demand, and so we were sending some of the work out. But now that we've got a larger facility, we're able to manage all the work.
Okay. So would you describe Artco as owned by Shervin, or are they two separate companies?
Yeah, Artco is owned by Shervin.
Okay.
So it's what we call now the Shervin group of companies.
Yep.
And so along with that then came Vogel, which is the company in Toronto that I talked about. That's also owned by Shervin. And then
That's the upholstery.
that's the
company?
upholstery division, yeah.
Yeah.
So-
So is Vogel making or is most of their work for Artco, or does Vogel have a lot of other customers outside of the hotel furniture?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we took over Vogel, they were also in the residential furniture line. And
Do you mean by like couches
yeah,
and that
couches
kind of thing?
and chairs,
Yeah.
bar stools, that kind of thing for residential.
For a house, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
for a house, yeah. That line did not intrigue me at all. We wouldn't have bought the company for that line.
Okay.
We were needing the company to keep on with our upholstered furniture for the hospitality industry. However, when we took over the company, I always have been told that it's better to keep as many eggs in your basket as what you can.
Okay.
And so we decided, you know what, we're going to take a good look at that. We're going to keep on that engine running. We're going to fine tune that engine. And maybe someday we'll have to make a decision that we're going to shut it down. But as of today, we still have it going.
Okay.
And so, yes, we do have a residential line that's going out to dealers across, mostly in Canada, a little bit in the U.S., but not much.
So that's going out to furniture stores?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
furniture stores, yeah.
So you're not making custom orders for people. Is that like large production? Like
Yeah, the
large
custom orders are
orders as
basically
well?
for the hotel industry where
Okay.
designers come along and say, you know what, they want this couch to be a certain design. We develop that couch, we get it tested, we get it reviewed, and then once it's been approved, then we will manufacture up to 300, 400, 500
Okay,
couches.
yeah.
So,
So both the hotel furniture and the upholstery tends to be large orders. Maybe there's a better way to describe this, but kind of the same thing, assembly line work, the same thing, one after the other.
yeah,
Is that right?
that's the way it is, yeah.
Are,
So
are kitchen cabinets that way too, or?
no, kitchen cabinets they're a one of. And so for the most part, we have done some high-rise buildings where we will
yeah.
produce, maybe 50 to 100 to 200 kitchens, but that's very rare that we do that. 99% of our kitchens, when that kitchen starts going into production on the floor, it's going directly to a customer, and it's specifically for that customer.
Okay, yeah.
So every kitchen that goes through, for the most part, is custom.
Gotcha. Yeah. Sorry, were you going to say something else about a large production or something like that, or?
No, basically on the hotel side, just to give a bit of a picture of what we do, we'll do front lobbies, and
Okay.
so that will be one of, and so we do have a custom department in the hotel factory in St. Clements. But then we'll do anything from, sometimes people come along and say we only need 25 rooms refurbished, so we'll
Okay.
do 25 rooms. And the next hotel comes along and says we need 350 rooms refurbished, and so then we'll do that. Or maybe it's a brand new build, but
Okay.
so we do the full spectrum. Whatever the client is asking for, we try to service them.
Nice. Do you prefer a very large amount of rooms, or a smaller number for production?
For the most part, we prefer the larger orders because there's a lot of legwork goes into design and development.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And setting up your plant for this new run. What happens is a lot of people say, well, you're into production furniture. Well, we are, and yet we're not, because we can have a 300-room hotel go through our plant and never see that project again after it's done.
Right.
There's nobody else that wants that style. And so, we are production, and yet we're not production.
It's not like once you've figured out how to build a certain car or something like that, you can do it for the next 10
That's
years.
correct.
It's
Yeah.
you're always going on to something
That's
else.
correct.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll get back into maybe some of the story of how you've gotten to the place where you are now, but just a couple other questions on the business. How many employees work for Shervin, or a general number?
Well, there's probably between 275 to 300. I don't have a direct number here,
Yeah.
but it's in that vicinity someplace.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously it's grown quite a bit since it began. So we'll learn a little bit about that as well. But just before we do get into some of that, I'm curious if there's any hobbies or interests that you have outside of your work, outside of your business, that you're interested in sharing, or that you enjoy doing.
Well, I've always enjoyed reading,
Oh, nice.
and that's one of my hobbies. I love reading, and so any spare time I'm typically reading something.
Very good.
And then I enjoy traveling,
Mm-hmm.
and we've done a fair bit of traveling. Also, and really enjoy being involved in mission work.
Okay.
Involved in a mission work over in Guatemala right now, so that's an interest of mine. Definitely is.
Mm-hmm.
And then just simply doing home improvements. I grew up working with wood, and so most projects, if they get done at home, I try to tackle them myself.
Okay.
Rather than hiring somebody to come in. If it's beyond my expertise, then I'll bring somebody in. But outside of that, I love working on things myself.
Very good. Even like renovating structure and things like that.
If there's any renovations or home improvements that we want to do, I like tackling that myself.
Very good. Yeah. Do you have any favorite books that you've read recently that you'd recommend?
Any favorite right off the top of my head? I love reading leadership books, and so I've got a number of those. Right now off the top of my head, I can't really think of any specific ones, but yeah.
Do you do a lot of your do you focus a lot of your reading on things that develop your business, or ways to think about, or books that are focused on business, I guess I'm thinking. Is that what a lot of your reading is? Or
Yeah, so a lot of people wonder how a person with only a grade 8 education could be able to manage what we're managing now. And I come along and say, well, there's numerous aspects that play into this whole thing. But one of them is just simply read and read and read, and read books on that very subject on leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a time when I picked up a lot of John Maxwell's books.
Okay.
I don't get as many of those anymore. After a while, you can exhaust a certain author.
You realize that they start to sound a little bit the same if
Get
you
a
read
little
too many?
repetitious. Yeah, that's exactly right. But I've just got a lot of books on leadership, and so that is an interest of mine.
Yeah.
And just there was a time when I went into business, I basically started by myself, and I still remember driving by companies that had 20 employees, 40 employees, 100, and I would roll my eyes and say, how in the world do they ever keep that thing functioning? Like, how does that work?
Yep.
And so I did a lot of reading to understand how you set up organization, and how you delegate responsibilities, and how you build teams, and how you support your people, and so on and so forth.
That's fascinating. So would you say that you also learned from the experience of doing it? Or would you say that reading helped you to avoid maybe some of the mistakes that you would have made if you wouldn't have been reading and thinking about building a business?
Yeah, I would say it's both.
Okay.
So reading helped me to avoid mistakes, and yet at the same time, I learned by making mistakes as well.
Yeah.
And so many times I had my team members come up to me and say, Kevin, if we don't change here, then something's going to go wrong badly. And so that prompted me to sit up and listen, because I could get sometimes so absorbed inside the box that I didn't have time to step back and really look at, or I didn't take the time to step back and really look at what was going on. And my team members were alongside of me, and they were observing some things that were taking place, and they were bold enough to encourage us enough to come and challenge me on whatever we might have been encountering, and we took a good look at it and tried to make the changes. So
Yeah, that's great. No, the reason I was curious about that is, well, for instance, with recently started this podcast, and I'd picked up a few books on it to read before I began.
Yeah.
But I also realized that I wasn't as effective at reading it as I would have been if I had already done it and then was trying to learn it. So I was wondering if you've experienced that it needs to be both reading and then experiencing using what you've read, and then also understanding better what you're reading because you're doing the experience yourself.
So there's just do a broad scope of reading. Like I said, I was reading a lot of John Maxwell's books, which they're great books, but then, and I don't have the authors for some of these, but there's another book called Predictable Success. And that one was written by Leslie, and I can't remember his last name.
Okay.
And that is a really, really good book on how a business can start, how it can hit a pinnacle, so to speak, and then crash and burn afterwards.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's a really, really good read for just helping people to understand how business can run and the pitfalls that are there that you want to try to avoid. Another book is called, I'm not sure if I have it in the proper order, but it's called Humble, Hungry, and Smart. And I can't remember who the author is on that one. And that is another really good read as to what kind of a person an individual should be in order to enter into entrepreneurship or starting their own business, and what kind of people he wants to retain within his company.
Okay, yeah.
And then there's another book out there, and I can't remember the name as well of the author, but it's called It's Not About You.
Ah.
And those are three books that I constantly keep showing or telling people that, you know what, those are three that come to my mind that if you want to read about, leadership and growth in your own personal life, those are good books to read just to help to keep the proper focus on business, because it's so easy to get sidetracked.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we're having a section where with each episode where we include notes. So I'll put those suggestions down that if people want to look further into it. So thank you for that. Well, since I think we're at a good place here to go back and just hear a little bit of the story of how you got into business and what it was then and how it's maybe grown to where it is now. So I'm curious. You said you had a grade 8 education. Were you exposed to business before you started one? Did you have family experience, or what kind of was the catalyst that got you into business?
So at the age of I believe it was seven or eight, that our family moved to Northern Ontario.
Okay.
So my dad had been involved in a metal fabricating business in Elmira, and then we moved to Northern Ontario on mission work. And he made the switch from metal fabricating to the logging industry.
Ah.
And so I'm not sure if that is where that whetted my appetite with working with wood, was walking alongside of my dad as he was in the logging industry. But as a child and just in my youth years, I just enjoyed building anything out of wood. Okay. And that just was a wide spectrum of things that we did.
Did you have a shop on your property or tools and things like that, or when you were growing up? Or?
That's a really good question. There's so many things that you could talk about here, but if there's any encouragement I want to give to fathers, is make sure you give your children tools that they can work with to develop their own flavor of whatever they're trying to drive at, their own passion for designing things and whatever it is. So Dad just had a table saw downstairs in our basement of our house. And I still can't believe that Mom would allow that table saw to be fired up down there. But it did happen, and I can't recommend that anymore. I would say start off with some other tools. Now, Dad also had jigsaws at home, and handsaw and hammer and nails. And so the table saw didn't get started up very often, but we did venture at times that we would start that thing up. But that's where my passion for woodworking started, was right there. Just the tools that Dad had in the basement of our
So
house.
you would play around with them and
Yeah.
build your own creations? Is
Yep.
that okay?
Built my own skis. So
Oh,
there was a hill behind our house, and I wanted to ski, and so I started. Dad had a library of books. It was I can't remember. It was on different things, on mechanics and on woodworking and on plumbing and on electrical and all this stuff. And I gravitated to the woodworking one, and in there was different blueprints as to or instructions how to build some of these things. And so I built my own set of skis
Wow.
and different types of sleds and whatever all it came along. We built it. So
very good. Did they work?
they worked. Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's
They
great,
did.
yeah.
Not like they would today, but they worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. So you kind of, you
So-
said you got a love for woodworking
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
And so where did that take you then?
So what happened then is when my dad or when our family moved to Manitoba then into metal fabricating, I worked in Dad's metal fabricating shop for maybe 2 to 3 months or something like that, and it was just not the place for me.
Okay. You were a teenager?
I was
or-
a teenager.
Okay,
I was 19 years old when we moved to Manitoba on mission work.
Okay.
Again, another extension of mission work. And Dad got back into metal fabricating. And so then, since metal fabricating wasn't down my line, I got into home construction, housing construction,
Oh, yeah.
and did not enjoy that. That
Okay.
was too rough. When somebody came along and said, just cut it to within the 16th of an inch, that wasn't close enough for me.
You didn't like that precision?
I didn't like that lack of precision.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
And so then I moved back down here again then
Okay.
to Eastern Ontario and got into work for Homestead Woodworks for a number of years. And that's where I really started developing more of my desire for getting into business. And so you asked where the real passion came from. I would say it came from my dad. Dad was always his own, worked for himself. He was an entrepreneur, and I observed how he ran business. And even though Dad never sat down with us and showed us how to run financials at the end and how to, turn a profit, so to speak, on paper, I never did have the opportunity to sit down with him and he showed the full scale of financials at the end of the year. He never did that.
Okay.
But he showed in his walk in and his action how to run a successful business. And just be careful and consider your major moves and do the best you can and service your customer. That was one thing that he drilled into us very, very strong, was make sure you satisfy your customers.
So these were all his own businesses that
Yes.
throughout your life, what he kept moving and getting into. Okay. Very
I only
interesting.
remember Dad as working on his own, so to speak. Yeah.
So was there a specific moment or trigger that made you decide to go off on your own, or was it something that was kind of building as you were doing woodworking at Homestead and thinking about business?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I maybe started too young, and yet maybe you should start business when you're young, because then you don't know all the pitfalls that are out there that could take you down.
Too naive.
Exactly right. Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
But I was only 23 years old
Okay.
when went into business, and it was just simply a passion that was continuing to build. And so I wanted to go on my own, and I kept looking around and thinking of the different opportunities that were out there, and just talked it over with my wife and talked it over with the family, and decided that now is the time to venture out. So it was always kind of a, so to speak, a desire that was there to run my own business.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did it look like once you started? What was the beginning of your business entrepreneurship like, or what? Yeah, how would you describe it?
Well, I still remember taking my last paycheck and bringing it home and handing it to my wife, and I was just loaded with fear,
Okay.
because I knew that from here on out, it's up to me to make sure that there's food keep getting put on the table, and that the future just was tremendously unknown.
Yeah.
And yet I had a passion to try to make it work. And I remember the tremendous thrill that went through me when I got through the first year and I was able to see just a very, very small profit on the bottom line. That had me excited.
Yeah.
I would have
yeah.
made a whole lot more money if I would have just stayed working and getting a paycheck.
Right.
But it was exciting to see that there was a small profit. And so basically just went out there and started making connections with different people. And I started off in New Hamburg in a 1,200 square foot shop.
Okay.
And so if anybody has any questions on how to start a business, I always say start as small as you absolutely can.
Okay.
And get to the very, very basics. And I realize that changes a lot with different sectors. I know the farming industry is looked at completely different. I understand that. But if anybody's in manufacturing, I come along and tell them just to start as small as you possibly can. So I started in a 1,200 square foot shop, rented a space in New Hamburg, and hung a shingle out at the end of the
Okay.
property there beside the street, and slowly but surely started building up a customer base.
Did you have a customer lined up before you started, or did
Not
you?
really, no.
Okay.
When I say not really, I had a neighbor that wanted some wooden screen doors built
Okay.
and a small table for his workshop of all things. And
Nice.
so that kind of got me going. And
Okay. Yep.
yeah.
Were you completely on your own? Like, was it just you, or did you have someone working with you those
It
first?
was just
first year?
me.
It was just
and
you.
my
Okay.
wife. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So you
Yeah.
did every part of building and
Yeah.
and connecting with customers and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep. It was all by myself and had to wear all the hats.
Yeah.
So
How long was it till you started bringing others on board?
I think it was about a year and a half to 2 years later
Okay.
where my brother Keith came on board, and then my brother-in-law Darren and Mike Good came on board, and the list goes. Yeah, Marcus Good started working for me, and from there it just continued to start building.
So was the workload growing and you needed to bring others on board? Is that where
Yeah.
what drove it?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah, if there's any advice I want to give somebody is in business is start as small as what you can and work by yourself for as long as what you can until you find that the amount of work that you're doing, the length of days that you're working is taking a toll on your family life, then something's got to give.
Okay.
So that's one of the big challenges of starting your own business is juggling family life and business life.
Yeah.
Because we as men, especially as entrepreneurs, are driven, and we can soon get so focused on business. But at the same time, I come along and I say that work by yourself for as long as you can, and don't hire anybody until you realize that something's got to really give here, or else we're going to fail.
And is the reason
So-
for that just to it raises the chance of success if you keep
Yeah.
leaner?
Keep
Is-
as lean as what you can. Yes,
Yeah.
it raises the chance of success because as soon as you hire somebody, you've got another overhead that has to be added to it.
Yeah.
And you're just going to start finding out that now you can no longer focus as directly on business. You're going to now have to take care of an employee,
Yeah.
and the list starts going on and on. But my dream was to have 4 to 5 employees.
Okay. So were you thinking that already when you first started?
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I knew that when I sat in my office and was doing paperwork, that my equipment out in the shop wasn't being used, and
Right,
it needs to
yes.
be running.
Yeah.
And I also knew that when I went out to install some cabinetry, that I had to lock my doors. And then I always was scared there was a customer going to be showing up and
Yeah.
he's going to come up to a door that's locked.
Yeah.
And so my dream was to eventually have 4 or 5 employees.
So the main parts of the business would always be covered with someone
That's
at some
correct.
point. Yeah.
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 So at what point did you get to the 4 or 5 employees? You had kind of described a
yeah.
few. Is that kind of you were
Yeah.
kind of right in the
Yeah.
sweet spot? Did you feel at that point?
I would say within 3 to 4 years, I was probably at about 4 employees, 4 to 5 employees.
Okay. And did it just keep happening that you had to keep making decisions? Do I keep growing?
Yeah.
Like, did you keep growing your customer base, or what was the
Yeah.
driver of the growth?
Yeah, so it was basically the customer base that kept coming along and asking for more work to be done,
Okay.
and what would happen is when more work kept coming in, I would sit down with my 3 to 4 men and just say, "All right, what do we do here?" And
Were you turning work down?
I don't think we ever turned work
Okay.
down, because that went against my nature to turn work down.
Okay.
But some people wonder, like, where did this growth, how did it happen? And I put the blame on my team. I said they were never willing to say no.
Okay.
And so it just continued to grow. But I have to take some of the responsibility myself. I realize that. But my team just came along and said, no, let's take on this challenge. We can do it. And so the work kept coming. I remember when the grandfather clock opportunity came along. Like, we knew that was going to change things in our company, and sat down with my team, and they said, yeah, definitely, let's give that a try. And so one or two of them grabbed a hold of that, and they had a passion for it, and really were behind this thing. And so then when I seen that kind of energy and enthusiasm within my team, I made the decision not to harness that and restrain it and pull back on it. I decided to let it run free and let it go.
So if they wouldn't have had that, would you been content to kind of stay the size you were?
Yeah, I had no dreams whatsoever of getting to the size we are today. I would have been content just to stay that size.
Yeah.
But like I say, when I saw that passion within my team, then that's when I said, okay, we're going to let it go, because I always told them that, like, if they ever are going to get off the ship, then I'm going to have to just throttle everything back again, because I'm not going to try doing this by myself. There's no way. And so I leaned heavily on my team.
Yeah, very good. So, were there you've talked about the grandfather clock making that decision. How far into the business was that? How many years had you been going when you made that decision to take on that first order of grandfather clocks?
I think that was around 5 years into business.
Okay.
Up until then, we were basically doing anything custom.
Right.
And then that's when that came along. And that was a game changer for us.
Yeah.
When that came along. And that actually was what opened the door then for us to get into a production line of hotel furniture now that we're at.
Right.
Today.
Yeah. You mentioned there. Were you doing kitchen cabinets up to that point?
Yes, I always did kitchen cabinets.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing that I definitely wanted to pursue that. I had a real interest in building kitchens.
Yeah.
So that started basically with, once I opened up my doors, then I just simply had some friends that were doing a home renovation or building a new house, and they called me and said, Kevin, we'd love you to build a kitchen. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a showroom. It was just simply on trust and good faith.
Yeah.
And we ventured out into it.
Nice. You talked about how the orders kept building for you, I guess, as you got bigger. Were there specific things that you did to advertise or to bring in customers, or what was your main way of building a customer base those first years?
Yeah. For the most part, it would have been word of mouth, but
Okay.
I always had some kind of a marketing engine running, so to speak. Mm-hmm. When I think back to my very first marketing dollars that I spent, would have been on placemats at a local restaurant in New Hamburg.
Okay.
Whether it did anything for us, I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
But I look back and I kind of smile and say, okay, I remember that being one of the first ones. But marketing was always a part of our business, but it wasn't until, I can't remember now, at least 5 years ago or something that Kristen Weber would have came on board, and she's the one that really took our marketing to a completely new level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where would you kind of rate marketing, advertising for a really young company? So someone that's starting out, what should you focus on as an entrepreneur in getting your name and your business out there? So
word of mouth is always your best marketing tool.
Okay.
It absolutely is. And so it's paramount that a person is willing to do excellent workmanship for a customer. And then what I come along and always say is go above and beyond for your customers at all times. But when you get into business, make sure you're going the second mile for your customer. And just what I come along is service him to death.
Okay.
And leave that wow factor that when you walk away, you know that even though you may have made some mistakes, and I always come along and say mistakes can actually be a good marketing tool, because there's nobody in life that is perfect. And so the customer already knows that you're not going to be perfect, but if you stand behind your product and you correct the mistake and make him happy, then he says, wow, that's the kind of customer that or the kind of supplier that anybody should want.
Yeah.
And so they're out there promoting you by word of mouth. So that, I'd say that's the most important thing is if you want your business to grow, is to make sure you service your customer and go above and beyond. But then you should always have something out there, just whether it's the signage on your vehicle, which is needs to be professional, it needs to be well done. The slogan that you put against your company all says something about who you are. And so there should be something out there. Every financial statement should have a marketing line in there of some sort, whether it's only $500 or whatever it is, that there's something that you're saying, no, I'm putting some specific attention to marketing.
So yeah, you'd recommend spending money on it right from the beginning. Yeah. Do you have any specific stories or anything that you remember from those first days of ways that you went above and beyond to service a customer and it worked out well, or is that tough to pull up on the spot?
It's would probably be tough for me to pull up on the spot, but when I think of looking back, and I know of mistakes we made. I know of times that something went wrong, and I just simply made sure that the client was aware that, look, I made a mistake here, and this is how we're going to go about making it right. Whether it took working long hours to make it happen, or whether it was it's always a financial hit, so to speak. Right. But make sure you stand behind that client, and and there's nothing really specific that comes to my mind.
Yeah, so, that's fine. So this is maybe moving just into the last number of years here. Have there been any other significant decisions or events that happened that again propelled the company to where it is now, or has it just kind of been slow, steady steps all the way along since your business started?
I would, there's certain specific things that may have happened. On the kitchen industry, the way that one has grown is just simply by getting more and more builders on board. And so there's just been that steady growth on the kitchen side.
You mean like a home builder will connect you to a customer?
Or another home builder is observing that, like when I talk about home builders, I'm talking about people that's all they do for a livelihood, that they build houses. And so, we want to make sure that we service all of them. And but you can have another builder come along and say, I heard about Shervin, and so I'd like you to start building kitchens for my houses that we're building. And so that's been the kitchen side has kind of been a steady growth. We started building kitchen cabinets in Perry Sound area, and so that opened up a market up there. And now we're we're no longer in Perry Sound, but we've moved over to Port Carling, and that's just that's a area where there's a lot of high-end homes, cottages being built. Right. Then we also opened up a location in Oakville, and so those are all things that continue to build momentum. Right. On the hotel side of it, I would say where that really significant growth period was when we took over Artco. Right. Now we were running the marketing arm, and we could intentionally go after certain aspects of business. And we knew that whatever jobs we landed, we were doing the work rather than, another company out there might have been getting the job instead. Okay. Yeah. So that's where we started seeing growth happening. Yeah. And I would say that Artco, the old Artco, was weak on making sure that they were servicing their client. And once they seen that shift and seen that, the marketing company also owns the manufacturing facility. It's a one package now. That just simply gave us more credibility, and the growth really started happening. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. They liked your customers liked that it was all one company. Yeah, they sure did. Yeah. Oh, very good. So you maybe have talked about some of these things, but if you want to just maybe give a list here of some of the things, what would you boil down, or some of the things that you've learned from the process of running a business? I've learned that don't allow failure to defeat you. Okay. So, we as entrepreneurs, or even just as individuals, we want to come through and we want to have everything working out perfect and everything's got to be fine. But once you're ready to realize that failure is a part of life, and you're willing to take that experience and embrace it and say, what can I learn from it? And how can I come along and turn this thing into something good? And I always keep telling my team that you have to allow yourself to make mistakes. Just don't make the same mistake twice. But mistakes can actually be a tool it's a powerful marketing tool. And once I reversed that and realized, when I made a mistake putting in a set of kitchen cabinets and got a measurement wrong, and the client, you could tell, was disappointed.
Yeah.
But they were standing there observing, how are you going to handle this thing? Like, is this going to be a cost on my part, or are you going to take the whole financial brunt yourself, or how's this all going to work? And you just came there and you serviced that thing and walked them through it and got it corrected and kept a good spirit about it. It turned into marketing dollars is what it did. And I tell my people that your mistakes can actually be, you can put it in the marketing line if you want to, if you handle it properly. So yeah, that would have been one of them.
Have you made any big mistakes, or can you see any failures from like a large maybe a larger view or a big picture view as a business or as a businessman?
Yeah. What I would say is know your numbers.
Okay.
When you go into business, and that's a mistake that I may have made when I was just simply, the company was growing and you didn't really know your true costs.
Like costs and things like
That's
that.
correct,
Yeah.
So make sure you slow down and take the time to sit behind your desk and get to know your numbers.
Okay.
And
is that something that you started doing early on, or?
Not soon enough,
okay.
I would say. I probably didn't do it soon enough. And it's always a challenge as you have different things going on and to pull all the information that you need.
Is it because you're making predictions that makes it difficult?
For us especially, we have a lot of moving parts.
Oh,
and
okay. So getting the true cost.
Getting the true cost and having them coming in. And then with technology today as well, you can get too much information on your table.
Oh.
And so you got to come along and say, okay, I don't need to dissect it to that level, but you need to know your numbers.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's something that I learned as I went further into business, is to make sure you know your numbers.
Yeah, very good. Were there other things that you wanted to say on things you've learned?
I would say another one that I've learned is I should say I'm learning, because I don't think you ever achieve, but the aspect of patience. I would say that entrepreneurs have a tremendous weakness on that. We are driven and we want to make things happen, and let's make sure it happens today.
Okay.
And don't wait for tomorrow. And things take time to develop, and things take time for growth. Everything just, it works that way. And we like to see things happening and just moving.
Okay.
And so to be able to just, so to speak, slow things down and smell the roses as you're going along is important.
Okay. So are you talking there on being able to correct a problem, or seeing a product go to development, or what are some of the specific ways that you've seen a benefit from having patience?
Just, your whole environment is going to change when your team sees that you're not just this driven person that,
okay,
all right, we're going to, and you have to have that sense of urgency as well. I've said that business is like sitting on your chair, half on your chair and half off.
Okay.
There has to be a sense of urgency. So there's this balancing act, but there's people that can get so driven that your employees are coming into work and they're under that pressure that, like, it just has to happen. It's got to be moving, and we got to get this going, and so you got to be able to just know, you got to keep that urgency there, but have the patience to allow everybody to continue to develop.
So you think of it as kind of a culture that you create in your business, that it's okay to take time and think about a problem, or that
it's
kind of
okay
thing?
to think about the problem. It's okay to sit back and enjoy life. It's like, you want your people to enjoy work, and so I was the type that when I went into business, that sometimes my lunch pail didn't get touched at all during work, because your plate was full and you just had a lot on the go, and no, you're going to stop and you're going to take your breaks, and you're going to enjoy life, and you're going to stop and have barbecues and all that kind of thing. And it's important. Yeah,
that's good. is there anything that when you look back, if you knew then what you know now, are there any different decisions that you'd make or anything that you'd do differently in starting the business and running it up till this point?
So that's a really good question. And I've rolled that through my mind numerous times. And where that question becomes a challenge is that too many times we come along, and when we look into history, we try to idealize things, and there's no such thing as idealism.
Yeah.
And so, as we go into the future, we never know what the future has to hold, so to speak. It's an unknown.
Yeah.
And that is healthy for us. It is very healthy. I wouldn't want it any other way. But the benefit of being able to look into history is now you've got the picture and you say, well, if I would have done this differently. And so I look back into my past, and basically the only thing that I would change or try to change is to try to minimize that aspect of the fear of failure and have more faith.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you minimize too much of that fear of failure and just go into business as, it's all going to work out and tomorrow's going to be a better day and surely the sun will shine tomorrow and I don't have to contribute anything to it. No, that doesn't work either. So that fear of failure, or you can turn it to the verbiage of the urgency that needs to be there.
Yeah.
It has to be there. And so to balance that, but I know I went into business with too much of a fear of failure.
Okay.
I remember letting it just sometimes dwell on me too much, that what if I fail? And what if this doesn't work out? And how is this all going to come together? And what if I let my family down? And what if I can't put food on the table? And so on and so forth. And so you have to keep that balance. And so looking back, I would try to minimize that more.
Yeah. Would you describe it as more of a feeling that you experienced, or would you say that it had significant influence on the decisions that you made, that you would have made different decisions if you would have had not so much a fear of failure?
No, I don't think, I look back and as I look at them, the big decisions that we made, like when I moved from New Hamburg to Wellesley, that was a significant move.
Was that to a bigger facility?
A bigger facility, yeah. And it was closer to home. But I look at that and we talked with my team and it's the right decision to make. And then when we moved from Wellesley to Hawkesville, again, that was a big move. But our team, we sat down and we talked about it and we analyzed it and we said, you know what, we're going to do this. And we made that move. And then we put an addition on the plant in Hawkesville. And then we put another addition. Well, those were all that we sat around the table and we talked about it and decided, we're going to go for it. And so I would say that we always were stepping into the unknown. We were taking big steps. But it's not that we were doing it just for selfish reasons. We were doing it to satisfy our clients. We were doing it to create a better employment environment. Yeah. And so if they were to fail, it's not that we would have ever looked back and said we made a rash decision and we knew we were like, there was all kinds of red flags jumping up, but we ignored them all. That I don't think that ever happened that I can think of in business.
Yeah, very good. Just maybe to go along with something that you've been talking about throughout here, and I get the sense that you put a big importance on the team that you have around you. Do you have anything more to say on that, on how you learn to, or some of the things that you've learned about developing a team and some of the benefits that you've gained from that? So
delegation is a extremely important aspect of an entrepreneur if he wants to allow his business to grow.
Right.
And again, I have high respect and full respect for anybody that comes along and says, I'd like to build furniture, but I'd like to work all by myself. I will respect that. I don't stand in the way at all. If that person wants to see his business growing, though, he's going to have to be willing to delegate. And my counsel is to look at people's strengths, and you can't completely ignore their weaknesses, but do not focus on their weaknesses. And I always come along and say, once a person's weaknesses overpower their strengths, then it's time to let them go.
Okay.
But as long as their strengths are overpowering their weaknesses, then keep them on board and just simply put those people in the seat in the bus where they belong and where they shine and where their strengths can just move forward. And I think of individuals after individuals within our company that came on board with very little experience, but we caught on what kind of strengths they had, and we just simply say, hey, this is where you fit, and you'll do a great job at that. And so support your team members, and I will come along and say I haven't always been effective in that as much as I should have been, but I try hard to come along and support my team members and give them the freedom to move with what they've been, the responsibility that they've been delegated.
Okay. Yeah.
And don't hold them back and say, no, I got to micromanage that department. You want to be there. You want to be able to see what's going on. You want to be able to have a pulse of what's going on, but don't put your thumb over top of it and try to control it, because you're just going to stifle that person. But when that person can come into work and know that he's got the freedom to make decisions, he's got the freedom to move forward, he's got the freedom for growth, that's when you can have a powerful team.
Yeah. So would you describe yourself as giving fairly large autonomy to those that are under you? And you talked about a little bit about not stifling their skills or creativity, that kind of thing. So yeah, is it tough to find a balance there between managing a section well, but yeah, how do you think about that relationship as a president to the rest of the company?
It is tough to find that balance. There are people out there that want their thumb on everything, and then there's people out there that just, I've given you that job, so now just go and do it. And
right.
I am too much the type that I can delegate too easily.
Okay.
And then let that person just run with it. The challenge that I have is that there are many, many things that are going on in the business now that I have no idea how to do it myself personally.
Right. Yeah.
So when it comes to technology, I am extremely limited on that. And so that's where I have to just, in all good faith, let them go with it.
Yeah.
We've had some what I'm going to call some sophisticated equipment come into our company that I have no idea how it works. I've told people that if I had to operate this thing, it would become a boat anchor for me.
Yeah.
That's all it could do. But I know what it's supposed to do. I know what I want it to do. But then from how to make this thing work, I have no idea. So just to be able to delegate and let that person go, and yet show interest in that person's environment, is important.
Okay.
And as the company grows, that's one area that I struggle at times with, making sure that I stay involved in that person's life and keep on showing an interest in what he's doing, because I can get pulled in so many different ways.
Yeah. So. No, it's interesting that you brought out that you maybe err on the side of delegating too easily. Would you say that an entrepreneur that starts on their own like you did, is it most often the struggle is not to micromanage every part, or and I don't know, maybe I don't know if you've observed this in others compared to yourself, but that was kind of the perception that I have. So it was interesting to hear that you maybe err on the side of delegating too easily. So I don't know if you have anything to say how your experience has been with that.
I would say that I've definitely seen both sides.
Okay.
I've seen some people that they're micromanaging everything. I've sat down with some businessmen that they're just frustrated because their employees aren't performing the way they should be, and you can tell that they're just simply controlling them. And I say, just let them go. Why did you hire them? Well, I hired them because I needed this work done. And well, are you letting them do it? Are you giving them the freedom to move forward? Well, no, I can't, because it's my business and I have to control it. So I've seen both sides. Yeah. My belief in life has been, I read this statement years and years ago, is surround yourself with people that are better than what you are. And when you do that, then I come along and say the sky is the limit. Yeah. And if everybody in the company takes that same mentality, that as soon as Kevin has surrounded himself with people that are better than he is, and if I will come along and surround myself with people that are better than what I am, and the next person does the same thing, you're basically, in a sense, I don't like using the word unstoppable, because there are many things that can come in that can stop you. But from there, the energy level just continues to go on.
Yeah.
The moment somebody comes along and says, no, I'm not going to surround myself with somebody that's better than me because I want to be in control, you've just stifled teamwork.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I think we'll come back to seeing what advice you'd have for someone that's starting their own business. But I'm kind of curious on what exact, or maybe some of the ways that you view from a broader perspective now than just focused on your own business. What do you think the purpose of business is? So if you're to try to describe in a few short words, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of starting a business, of running a business? What should be the end goal? I'm curious what you have to say about that.
So about, I'd say 15 to 20 years ago, I sat down with my core leadership team and I said, it's time we put on paper what our vision is for our company and what is our goal. And after quite a number of meetings, we defined it into just a short, I said, I'd like to see it in a kind of in a one sentence statement. And so we define it as our purpose, our goal in business is to honor God, satisfy our customers, and improve our company. And we've tried to, as we've gone through life and continue to move forward, is that's what we keep that as our defining purpose and our vision for our company.
Okay.
If somebody comes along and wants to build business simply for their own ego, it's going to have a dead-end street. It just will. The next generation is going to come along and see that's all Dad was trying to do, was build his own empire. And he never included us, and it was just all about himself. I'm not really interested, and then they move on.
Yeah.
Or you're just going to see failure eventually. That's just the way it works. But if somebody wants to come along and broaden it and say, I'm out there, I want to, first of all, honor God and make sure he gets the glory through this whole thing, and then satisfy your customers. That's, you get up in the morning, it's not about you, it's about your customers, and your customers can be your employees, your customers. And you say, you know what, that's our passion, is to make sure that our customers are satisfied. And then another passion you have is to improve your company. Never just simply say, well, it's just status quo and it's the way we've always done it. No, we're going to look at it, we're improving. And so you can keep those purposes and visions in focus. I think you do well. Yeah.
Have you seen a change since you've kind of defined those things? I mean, it's been a number of years now, like you said.
Yeah.
Has that been a helpful way to think about what you're doing as a business?
I would say it brought us all on the same page, but I would say those were within our, like the reason that there was around 5 of us sitting around the table that developed this. Yeah. The reason that got put on the table was because all 5 of us basically had it within our hearts. And we were able to get it out there. And like we had all kinds of hen scratching and words written on paper. And some people think all these statements just get put together on a whim. And I said, no, there's hours of time gets behind these short statements. To develop them, and so as we started putting our ideas on the table, that's what we came up with. So in a sense, they're in your heart, and even though I'm a full proponent of having written statements, there are many successful people out there that do not have a written statement, so to speak. It's right within their heart, and it's just what drives them every time they get up in the morning. It's what they've got that vision. Yeah. So, but it's healthy for anybody to be asked that question, like the way you asked me. It's very healthy for everybody to be asked, what is your vision? Yeah. And it stops you in your track and says, okay, what really is it?
Yeah. Where does turning a profit fit into that as a business? Does that not have to be a goal as well?
Yeah. Profit is an absolute in the success of a business. Yeah. When you look at that as your number one, then that's where you become self-centered and it's all about me. But it absolutely has to be looked at. I come along and say, if you take care of all the other aspects of business, make sure the engine is running smoothly, then profits should be the result of all these things that you're putting your focus on. Profits is not a guarantee, and there's going to be years that you go through in business that there is no profit, and you haven't really changed anything within your company. The vision is still there, the culture is still there, the passion is still there, but because of circumstantial situations that came along beyond your control, you have run a loss.
Yeah.
Or maybe you did make a mistake in how you quoted on this project, not intentionally at all, but yeah, you were blindsided with something or you overlooked something, and you're going to run a loss. You better sit up and look very closely at those numbers when you are running a loss and figure out what's it going to take to turn this thing around. But when that becomes somebody's primary focus, then you can soon go down the wrong track.
Yeah, and is it because if you do focus solely on profit, is it too easy to miss on some of the things that you were talking about within your vision?
Yeah. The moment you're all you do is focus on the bottom line, and then you're going to start looking at your employees as a means to make profit, as a tool to make profit, and you're soon going to start shortchanging them and trying to take advantage of them, and you're going to start looking at your suppliers as a means to make a profit, and you're going to be driving deals and that aren't right.
Yeah.
And you're going to do the same thing with your customer.
Right.
And I always say, whenever you're sitting down and trying to do a deal, look at it as a win-win situation. So you can have a customer sitting across the table that says, well, your price is way too high. Well, to make that a win-win situation isn't necessarily just to drop your price. To make it a win-win situation, you come along and you say, well, this is what you're getting, Mr. Customer. And don't you appreciate what all you're going to be benefiting once you move ahead with this project? And it's going to be so beneficial for you. And so you continue to look at a win-win.
Yeah.
So.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I put the question down here. What's the role of business within a community? And I'm not sure how you interpreted that question, but how do you see yourself as a business in the local community, within the world? What's your role?
Yeah. So I always say your business should make your community a better place than what it would be if your business wouldn't be there. And so like some people, they say, so what kind of revenue do you generate in your business? And I always come along and say, well, that's almost a number that you can't present. You can't put a finger on it. Sure, you can look at your sales dollars and say, well, that's the revenue line there, but that doesn't spill it all out, because you come along and you're putting wages into your employees' pockets.
Right.
They're going out there and they're spending it within the community. And that might be the local grocery store that is dependent on your business to survive, because that's how they keep on going, and the local clothing store, and the list goes on and on and on. So when you can stop and say, you know what, my business embetters this community. If I shut down, it's going to have an effect on the community. Maybe it's just going to be a very minimal effect, but it will have a negative effect. And if you can say that, then you're being a blessing to the community.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what all the consequences are of the COVID-19 crisis that we went through here in the last few months. Have you seen any effects from that, from customers or employees or suppliers, that kind of thing? Do you have a sense of what it's going to do for the next few years to our communities?
I don't have a full perspective on it. There are businesses that are going to go out of business, but then there's others that are going to be coming in to fill that void, so to speak.
Right.
So how that's all going to play out, I never like to see a business going out of business. I just don't like seeing that. But at the same time, it can open up the door for a strong business to become stronger. Yeah. That opportunity is there. But yeah, I'm not too sure exactly what the full fallout of that is going to be yet.
Yeah, it's hard to be able to make some of those predictions now. Has it hurt your business significantly?
What happened is that when the situation hit us in March, the construction industry was shut down for a period of time.
Right.
And so then everybody just held back from purchasing kitchens.
Yeah.
And now that that has opened up again, it has just basically come back to much like it had been in the past. Maybe not quite, but very close.
Okay.
And so I would have seen that as a V return.
Yeah.
But so I don't see much change anymore on the kitchen side of it. It looks like it's going to continue to grow, and we're living in a very established community,
Right.
and a thriving community. So that's good to see. But on the hotel side of it, we've definitely seen a change there
Okay.
with entertainment and the tourism industry slowing down.
Yeah.
That has definitely affected the hospitality sector. And so the work is starting to come in slowly, but it could be a while before it really comes back to where it had been pre-COVID.
Yeah. And that I can see how that would be a bigger effect than the local houses and things like that, because it's more of a international business. Is a lot of your customers in the States for the hotel side?
A large percentage are in the U.S.
Yeah. Back to your role within the community. How do you view your relationship with I'm not sure what the right term is here, but rivals or other businesses that are providing the same product? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So it makes it interesting when you have friends that are in the same business.
Oh yeah.
And we're sitting around the campfire and discussing the same thing, and you can be bidding on a job, and the other person is also bidding on the job, and you may lose the job to that other individual, but then there's times when you'll be awarded the job and it gets taken from the other individual. And so I always come along and say, for starters, we live in a community where there's lots of work. And secondly, I always come along and say that competition is probably one of the best things for business.
Okay. Yeah.
It keeps everybody on their toes. It keeps everybody sharp. It keeps everybody looking at ways to improve, and it brings out the best in every company, or it should bring out the best in every company.
Right.
Is what it does.
It's good for us as consumers too, if there's competition.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So competition is healthy.
Yeah.
It's needed. When there's no competition, then that's not a healthy place to be. So I try to maintain a friendship. Yeah, it's not that I'm one that doesn't come along and just simply open up all the different things that we're doing within our company. If we make improvements in that, I'm not one to just come along and just spill that out and just say, hey, by the way, Mr. Competitor, we just landed on a big improvement, and you can streamline things if you do this certain thing.
Okay.
But neither do I come along and say that, I'm going to make sure that gets hidden within our company and nobody has ever been able to be allowed to hear about it. So I always come along and say, your people are what really makes your company.
Okay.
And so continue to find good talent, retain good talent, and that will stand you in good stead as you go out there and you face your competitors.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Do you think that there's improvements that businesses as a whole could make? Occasionally you kind of hear that there's a perception out there that business owners are all greedy, or there's negative connotations with it. Do you think there's things that businesses could be doing better to change that perception, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah. That's a big question. Because your first impression is such a lasting impression. And however, I'm going to come along and just say that the lifestyle that a business owner lives is going to speak volumes to the community and to his people. Where his focus is going to leave an impression. So your question is there areas of improvement? Yeah, absolutely. There's areas of improvement for every one of us.
Right.
But if we continue to go out there and try to live lives of integrity, and we try to make sure that we're there to service our employees, our customers, and it's not about us as individuals. That goes a long ways with creating a healthy environment out there for any. Yeah, there's sour tastes out there, and there's some young men out there that say, I'm not going to go into business because I just have a really bad taste for business owners. Well, I'm disappointed to hear that. I wish that wasn't out there. And so, yeah, every one of us have to take a look at, okay, what kind of an image are we presenting out there, and how can we continue to improve?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I to kind of wrap this up, I'm curious if there's things that you wanted to talk about that didn't get a chance to yet, but maybe to start the conclusion here, I'm curious if you have a few pieces of advice that you could boil down for someone that's interested in starting a business or is in the process of running a business and trying to get it off the ground, that kind of thing. So what do you have to say to someone that's starting out?
So I've had some young men come to me already and say, I'm thinking of starting my own business. And then that's when I will come along and I'll ask the question, why? And I want to hear their passion. I want to hear what their goal is. And I've had someone make a statement that I want to go into business because I want to eventually own a multi-million-dollar spread with a house on it. And that's what my goal is. And I said, well, then don't go into business if that's your drive. But at the same time, he has to be passionate about going into business. So if he's going into business just with, well, he'd like to give it a try, well, that's not going to work either. So he has to have a passion. And to me, my advice to a young man is have a passion to go into business, to service your community, to embetter their lives. We build kitchen cabinets. And I'm not ashamed at all to come along and say, you know what, we've just put some features into a kitchen that is going to make it easier for the person working in the kitchen to function and to do their job. I have no problem with sharing that. We don't have to work in an environment that was the same, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
So what are they doing to better people's lives? And so, and then get passionate about what you're doing. And if they don't have that burning passion, then I'd say, don't bother going into business.
Yeah.
I come along and I encourage them to start on a shoestring. I mentioned that before, but start just as low as what you possibly can so that when you do trip and fall, which will happen, you don't have as far to go and you keep working your way up. And don't worry about having the best and the fittest and the finest to go into business. But when you do purchase something, make sure you purchase well. And that was a bit of advice that my dad gave me.
Okay.
And I learned that from young up. He always waited to buy something until he could buy the tool that was going to do the job properly. So he wasn't in a rush to buy the tool. He would wait until he could to purchase well. But start on a shoestring. It will give you the greatest reward. I advise them to be willing to work hard and long hours. Okay. And I always say that with tongue in cheek because you somehow have to come along and you've got to, if he has a family, if the individual has a family, they've got to keep that in check and keep that in balance.
Right, yeah. Because
it is so easy to shortchange your family for the drive of business. But at the same time, there are people want to go into business because they don't like working a 10-hour day and they'd like to just simply work an 8-hour day or something like that. And I said, well, that won't work. Yeah. Not from my experience. If somebody has some better advice, they're free to share that. Yeah. Another one I have here is it's just simply pinch every penny that you have. Just don't do any extravagant moves. You should never do any extravagant moves, but especially in the onstart of business, you have to watch your moves. So, then the last one I have here is hire the best accountant that you can afford.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It is so important that you have somebody looking over your shoulder and helping you come along, and because entrepreneurs are driven to make something happen. Right. And they think the profits are just going to naturally flow, and that's not the way it works. And so you need to hire the best accountant that you can possibly afford. So there's accountants out there that you'll never be able to afford when you first go into business, but then there's other accountants out there that you shouldn't be having on board. Yeah. You should think that one through carefully.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. Thank you. Um, at the kind of my last question here, I have down is there anything that you'd like to talk about or that you'd like to promote? So I'll just turn it back, I guess, to you. There's anything you'd like to say here to kind of finish things off?
So one thing I like promoting on in business is continue to look at every aspect of your business with a fine-tooth comb. And since we were in the grandfather clock business, I liken business to a grandfather clock movement. And so if you walk up to a grandfather clock and you open up that side door and you take a peek inside and you see this clock working and see all the different movements in there and the different parts. And you know that, well, all this clock does is tells time, really, when it comes down to it.
Right, yeah.
And so you say, is that little gear really needed? What good does it do? And so you take a no-spin pliers and you go in there and you just take a hold of that little gear and you pull it out and you put it in your hand and you take a look at the clock and you notice that this big clock stopped.
Right.
And you look at just this little gear and you say, seriously, like, you're going to stop telling me what time it is just because I pulled this little gear out? And the clock says, yeah, that's all it took. And too many times in business, we look at that, it's just a small thing. It doesn't really matter. Big deal. I haven't got time to really look after that. And so I'm just going to keep on working on the big picture. And no, you do well to stop and say, if that gear isn't needed, well, then remove it from the business. But if you do remove it, it better have nothing to do with the business.
Right.
But if it needs to be there, then you better be maintaining it, making sure it's oiled and it's taken care of, because it is so crucial. And so people ask me, well, what is that gear? I said, well, you figure out for yourself. You better know your business well enough to know what it is. And so you keep looking at all the different aspects of your business and fine-tuning it. Mm-hmm. I remember my dad telling me that business is like riding a bicycle. You're either going to be moving forward or you're falling over. And so keep looking at every aspect of your business so that your business continues to move forward. Because there is somebody, someplace, that is observing your business and they're saying, you know what, I could do it better than that. Mm-hmm. And they come out there, and if they can prove it that they can do it better than what you can, then there's just somebody going to start moving ahead, and you can be left in the dust. And so you constantly want to keep looking at what can I do to improve and make the needed changes and keep moving forward and keep growing. Growth is not necessarily a larger facility every other year, but there has to be growth within a company to be successful.
Yeah. And you said growth doesn't need to be more employees or larger facility, but do you mean by that always improving, like you talked about as your part of your vision?
Yeah. Always improving and saying, there's got to be a better way to do it than what we are doing it today. Yeah. And search out what is that better way. Yeah. There's got to be a way to build a better product. There's got to be a better way to service our customer. And there's got to be a better way to improve the product that we're making. And maybe there is nothing better than that very aspect, but in the big picture, there's always going to be improvements that you can make. Yeah. So when somebody comes back along and says, what are you doing you ask the question, what are you doing to improve your company? And they say, well, we don't have to improve in here. We've attained. You're on your slope downhill now. So yeah.
No, anything else that you wanted to say or had prepared before we close it out?
Well, I think as I look over the whole subject here that we've addressed, it's been focusing on entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And I get excited when I see a young man or a young lady that says, I'd like to go be involved in business of some kind. Yeah. I get excited. I just naturally do. And I tell them right at the onstart, I'm not going to put any cold water on it. I just won't. You're talking to the wrong person if you want me to throw cold water on starting your own business. And then I come along and I try to go through some of the things that I've just shared throughout this session here, and give them some of the concerns that I have, some of the warnings, some of the things that they should bear in mind, some of these key points that I've shared with them. Those are ones that have stood me in good stead, and so I love when I hear somebody says, I'm starting my own business next year, and I say, good for you. I wish you well. Yeah. So.
No, and I think that the topic of entrepreneurship is an important one for anyone to think about. Like, I think it's important for a employee of a business to think about, hey, how can I make the job that I'm doing my own? How can I contribute to the community? Do some of those aspects that you talked about that are important for a business owner. So I think that someone that's working for someone else can take a lot of the things that you talked about and can apply it to their job and the things that they're doing. So I think that's great. Anything else? Are you good there?
Thank you, Roland, for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
I was asked the question why I'm doing this, and I just made the statement that if I can be of an assistance to somebody in the pursuit of business or in business, then it's well worth it. And I do not have all the answers. I've made my mistakes. I continue to make my mistakes, but I am blessed with how God has provided for us, and it's been a great journey. Looking back, I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. No,
I had one of my sons ask me some time ago, Dad, would you go into business again if you could do it all over? And I says, absolutely, I would go into business again. So, yeah.
No, that's great, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to look back and say that. So, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Kevin, for sharing your knowledge with us. One of the reasons that I really enjoyed this conversation is because I actually worked for the hotel furniture division of Shervin for 2 summers in the last few years between teaching school. And so it was really interesting to hear some of the stories and history of how the company came to be. Also, though I'm not starting a business, I found much of the advice very relevant to things that I have going in my life right now, whether it's starting this podcast and being a father to a young family. I really appreciated some of the advice that Kevin gave, so thank you for that. Thank you also to all of you that have given feedback about the podcast. I've gotten a couple of ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and really appreciate that. Some of you have sent me messages or told me things in person, and that's been great. So thank you for all the positive feedback and the suggestions of ways to improve the show. Thank you, too, for those of you that have talked about and shared the podcast with others. And I really like to see some of the conversations that have come out on social media in response to specific episodes. And that's great if my conversations with people just simply start other conversations that get people thinking and talking. So that's really great. If you want to connect with the show, a good way to do that is to send me an email. The email address is contact@everydayexpertise.ca. There are also different ways to connect on the website, which is everydayexpertise.ca, and you also find show notes there if you're interested in learning more about a specific episode. And of course, social media is always a good way to connect as well. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so you can follow the show there. That's all for now. Join me again next week to learn from the expertise of everyday people.